Hi everyone, I'm Cody Rue and this is the Church of Logic. Today I'm going to talk about ordinals, ordinal arithmetic. It's a really fun subject. I say this about every subject, but hey, that's why I'm doing a podcast. And it's kind of a mathy subject. It's not on the face of it related to mathematical logic, but if you dig even a little bit, you find that it has a strong connection to mathematical logic. And it's fun. It's doing arithmetic with infinities. It's just very exciting subject. So this is going to be a fun one. An ordinal is just a mathematical thing like groups or rings, spaces. Is just something defined in math, and it has a very simple definition. Basically, there are two things you need to be an ordinal. One, you need to be a kind of a collection of elements with a total order on it. A total order means you can compare any two elements, and you really can take any two elements and compare them, and they're either going to be A is less than B or B is less than A. And the second condition, which is kind of the interesting one, is if you have any sequence of things that descend strictly, right? So you have A greater than B, greater than C, greater than D. You keep going. You can't actually go down an infinite number of times. There's no sequence that strictly goes down an infinite number of times. So one example might be, if you have the integers between 0 and 5, right? You can go from 5 to 4, and that's going down, and 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. And when you hit 0, you're stuck, right? You can't go down anymore. So you can't build an infinite sequence, right? And the integers, of course, you can. You can go down to 1, down to 0, and then to -1, -2, and you can keep going like that, always going down for an infinite number of steps. And so the integers aren't an ordinal. But if you don't allow the negative numbers, as we'll see in a bit, this is actually an ordinal, right? It's a very special ordinal. So, okay. So if you take all these kind of finite sequence, if you take a kind of finite set, right, the integers from 0 to some number, what's kind of cool is you actually know how many steps you can go down at worst or at best before you run out of space, right? If you have the integers between 1 and 10,000, you can go down 10,000 times. But if you take all the natural numbers, you're eventually going to have to hit 0, right? There's no space to go below 0. And so you're going to run out of time. But you can't, in advance, predict how many steps you're going to take because you sort of don't know where you're going to start from. And this choice of where you start from, I think it gives this interesting way of seeing ordinals as this kind of game, right? It's a game. And the game is played between you and some player. I want to say the Grim Reaper, right? The Grim Reaper is trying to come down the steps, and you can't prevent it, right? It's this sort of grim outlook on life that an ordinal game allows the Grim Reaper to reach the bottom eventually. But here's the game. The Grim Reaper gives you a choice. Each time it doesn't know where to go next. It gives you the choice. And you have to choose, but you can choose whatever you want, right? So if the Grim Reaper gave me a choice of where should I go in the natural numbers, I'd probably choose a really big number, right? I'd choose, 10 million or something. And then the Grim Reaper can go down, 9,999,999, and keep going down. But that choice, right, allowed me to delay the inevitable a little bit further. And as we'll see, this game where we go back and forth, the Grim Reaper asks me to make a choice, and I try to choose, something big. This sequence of choices that I have to make is going to be instrumental in what it means to be an ordinal. Okay, we see that for a finite ordinal, for the set of integers from 0 to 5 or whatever, there's not really any choice, right? You want the Grim Reaper to be as slow as possible. You put them at 5, and then they keep going down, and they have at most 5 steps. But there is a choice for the natural numbers. The natural numbers, when it's seen as ordinals, you see that it has this different quality. There is a choice. There's a game to play. And the fact that there's a choice makes it different somehow than the finite ordinals. This ordinal has a name, right? It's just the natural numbers, but usually when it's talked about as an ordinal, we call it omega. And we call it omega because that's the last letter of the alphabet. So it's sort of like the ultimate ordinal. But it's not actually the ultimate ordinal. The person who sort of theorized or thought about this mathematically at first was Gerhard Cantor, one of the originators of this whole mathematical logic nonsense we've been talking about for, 30 episodes? And Cantor noticed this kind of interesting fact that, hey, once I have two ordinals, I can do things to them. And once I have an ordinal, I can sort of transform it into another ordinal. Here's one thing you can do. You can take omega, which, as I've said, is just a set of natural numbers, and you can add something on top, kind of. You can just sort of say, oh, there's an actual extra step. If you think of this as a ladder, right? You add this kind of rung above this whole ladder of natural numbers. And now Death has to step down that first one and then into the natural numbers. And there comes to you to make a choice to which natural number they step to, and then keeps going down. So you see, it's different, right? There's a rung right above, and you can add another rung, right? And a third one. And what you could even do is add a whole copy of the natural numbers right above, right? So now you have two choices to make, right? Death asks you, what is the number of the rung I should step to in that top copy? And then, once they reach the bottom of that first ladder, they have to ask you again, and you have another choice, right? So you could say, oh, go to the 10,000th rung on that top copy, and then 9,999th, etc. And then once you hit the bottom of that top copy, come back to me. This is actually an addition operation on the ordinals. You can take two ordinals, you can add them together, and basically adding them together is just putting one on top of the other. Now, what's kind of interesting is that if you add two ordinals together, you don't necessarily get the same thing as if you add them together in the opposite way, right? If you add omega, this omega ordinal, and 5, that's like adding 5 rungs above, right, this infinite ladder. And so, Death has to step down those 5 rungs and then ask a choice, right? But if you put the 5 rungs at the bottom, Death asks you right at the start, right? Because these rungs are at the bottom. Death has to ask you a question right at the start where to step into. And then at the end, those 5 rungs don't really make a difference, right? I could have just sent Death 5 steps lower or 5 steps higher. It doesn't matter that these 5 rungs are at the bottom. So what does that mean? That means that the ordinal 5 plus omega is really just the same as the ordinal omega, right? As far as this game interpretation goes, it's really the same thing. But omega plus 5 is not. Death has to step down a few before it asks you a question. And so, yeah, omega plus 5 is really a different ordinal. And omega plus 6 is, also a different ordinal, right? And great. So we see that addition is not commutative, which is kind of cool. It's a kind of an interesting fact. And another thing we can notice, but this is going to have to be for the next episode, is that you can multiply ordinals. You can actually have this operation of multiplication, and it really kind of works the way we expect. It takes two ordinals, it somehow combines them to build this new ordinal that has way more power than the original ordinals had. And I'll explain this probably next time. And there's so much to say about the ordinals and their connection to logic in general and computer science, and it's a really exciting subject. I'm going to be psyched. Take care, everyone. I will see you next time.